Loops are the final type of control structure that we're going to be discussing right now. Loops are an excellent choice when you want to execute a section of code repeatedly. Sometimes you might want to print something a certain number of times, or you may want to do something with each value in an array. An array is a list of values, and we'll be looking at those in another section of our course. In either of these cases, and many more, you might want to use a loop. PHP supports three kinds of loops: for, while, and for each. The while loop is similar to for, but it's used most frequently when you're retrieving values from a database or reading from a text file. The for each loop is related to using arrays, and we'll be talking about that in a later section of our course as well. I do want to introduce you to the for loop though. The for loop is designed to perform one or more statements for a determined number of iterations, unlike the while loop, which runs until a condition is false. They're similar, but they have significantly different concepts, so just make sure that you understand that with a for loop, you're going to perform one or more statements for a determined number of iterations. You normally use a dummy variable in the loop for this particular purpose. The syntax for a for loop looks like this. You use the word for, and in the parentheses, you're going to pass on the initial expression, followed by a semicolon. Then you'll pass in the condition, followed by a semicolon, and then you're going to have the closing expression. And then inside the curly braces, you're going to list your statement or statements. The initial expression is executed once. It's executed the first time the loop is called. Then the condition is used to determine whether to execute the statements, and then the closing expression is executed each time the condition is found to be true, but only after the statements are executed. So here's a flowchart diagram that represents how a for loop is executed in PHP. You start with a for loop, it runs the initial expression, then it's going to hit the condition, and if the condition is true, it's going to do something, and then we're going to run the after expression, and then it'll keep testing the condition, and if the condition is not true, it'll exit the loop. So this is what happens once the condition is false. Here's an example of a simple loop that would print out the numbers 1 through 10. So you can see here, I start off with my initial expression. I'm using I as a counter and I'm setting it to 1. Then I'm executing the condition. I'm testing to see if my I variable is less than or equal to 10. And then I have my closing expression where I'm incrementing I by 1 every time it goes through the loop. So in this case, it would just print 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth until it got to 10. We're going to be using a for loop to expand the registration form that we've been working on in this section of the class. Here's the form that I've been working on. We're going to change the year born so that we can ask users for their complete birthday. And we're going to use a for loop so that we can easily create drop-down menus for the day and for the year. In order to do this, I'm going to be using PHP inside of the HTML. So we'll still be parsing to our PHP file that parses the form, but I need to incorporate some PHP into the form as well. I've already saved my file with the .php extension. In order to incorporate PHP into your file, you need to make sure that the file is saved as a PHP file. Then what we're going to do is we're going to come to the section that currently asks the user for the year that they were born. I'll go ahead and I will comment this out, and I'm going to be changing this code and adding some new additional code. So instead of having one prompt that asks for the year, we're going to have 3 separate prompts that ask the user to enter the month born, the day, and the year. So for the month, I'm going to use a select menu, and I'm going to give it a name of month. Let's give it an ID of month as well. And I'm going to pass in options for the 12 months, and I'm going to assign a value that corresponds with that specific month. So if we save our page now and we refresh, you can see that I'm simply going to get a pull-down menu that asks the month of their birthday. Then I'm going to add another select item, and this is going to prompt the user to enter the day of the month that the user was born. Now, obviously, you can see from this select menu, I had to add 12 items. If I wanted to prompt the user to add in the day, I would have to add 31, and this can get fairly long. So we're going to add some PHP so we can consolidate down this code. I'll begin by making a select menu for the day of the month that the user was born. This code is going to start my select form element. The list of possible values is going to be generated using PHP. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create my opening PHP tag. And then I'll do some returns and create the closing PHP tag. Because PHP can be embedded within HTML, we're going to use it to populate the drop-down menu. I'm going to be using a for loop to print out 31 days as select menu options. So we'll begin by creating our for loop. I'm going to use I as my counter and I'm going to set it equal to 1. Then I'm going to use the semicolon and we'll write our condition that says I is less than or equal to 31. And then we're going to go ahead and set up a counter where we're just going to increment I every time it goes through our for loop. And now I'm going to put my statement. My statement is going to be that I want to have a print statement, and we're going to actually print out our option tags, and we're going to set the value, and the value is going to be equal to, and I'll use my backslash so that I can escape and use quotes again, and the value is going to be the value of I, so whatever it currently is. I'm going to use my escape so that I can put my third set of quotes. Then we'll have the closing option tag, and then I'm going to actually print I again so that that's what shows up in my select menu. And then we'll simply close the option tag, and we're going to use escape N to create a return. So what's happening is our loop begins by creating a dummy variable named I. On the first use of the loop, the variable is set to 1. Then, as long as I is less than or equal to 31, the contents of the loop are going to be executed. And every time it goes through our loop, we're going to increment I by 1, so that at some point I will be greater than 31, in which case the loop is going to exit. The loop will ensure that it keeps checking the condition until the condition is no longer true. If we save this file and we go look in the browser, you can see that I have a parse error on line 61. And if we go to line 61, I actually forgot my $sign in front of my I variable. So let's save again and refresh. And here is our pull-down menu. So obviously when we use the month pull-down menu, our select menu, we see all of the options that we actually hard-coded and input. If you go to the day field, you're going to see that we have a value of 1 through, you're only going to see 26, but you'll have to trust me that it goes all the way down to 31. So our day field is now being populated with 1 through 31. This is a really great advantage because we've consolidated down the code considerably. Instead of having to print out 31 repetitive option statements, I am doing the exact same thing with simply 3 lines of PHP code. So what we're getting here is we're getting some dynamic content that's being generated for our form. We're going to do the same thing for the year. So I'll set up my next select statement. This one is going to be for the year field. So I'm going to give it a name of year and an ID of year. And I'm going to have my first option value be empty, and it'll just display the text year. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and we're going to have some PHP generate the content for the year dynamically. And this will be similar to what we just did, but we're going to take advantage of using the current year that we used in one of our previous exercises so that we can have code that is going to not need to be updated continually. So I'm going to start off by setting a variable for current year, and I'm going to make it equal to date, and I just want to get the year field. Now, even though we're using this same variable inside of our parsing script, I still need to identify it here because this particular file sends the information to that parsing script, but it has no access to the variable. So I'm going to set up the variable, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to set up a for loop, and we can use the same counter of I. We're going to set I equal to the current year minus 100. So this drop-down menu is going to have 100 entries. And because right now it's 2018, you will be able to pick your current birth year all the way back down to 1918. So if you're over 100 years old, my form isn't going to work for you, but you could obviously adjust that if you felt like you had users that were going to be older than 100. Then I'm going to set up my condition, and my condition is simply that I is less than or equal to the current year. And then I'm going to iterate I by 1 again. And what we'll do for the print statement is we're going to write something very similar. We're going to print out the option value. We're going to pass in whatever the value of I is, and we'll display that inside of the option field as well. And that's all I need to do. If I save this and we go back out to the browser and we refresh, we're going to have our month, our day, and our year entry. And I know that you're not going to be able to see all of the year fields, but if I scroll down, it does go all the way to 2018. So I'll just select 2018 so you can see it. This PHP code that we're using is generating 100 lines of HTML code, 100 option tags for us, but you can see that it's much more concise and easier for us to leave PHP to do the heavy lifting in this case. If I open up the source code just so that you can see this, here's the div that contains the year born information, and here is our year information. So you can see that all of this stuff, option value 1918, all the way down to option value 2018, is being dynamically created. And the same thing is happening with the days of the month that are being generated in here. So that's pretty cool. I think that this is a really great use of PHP because it just helps you to consolidate down what you're doing, and it also keeps it more current in that you don't have to update this continually. Couple tips that I want to give you very quickly about using loops. It's very conventional when you're using a for loop to just use a simple variable as the counters. So commonly you might use I, or you could use J or X or whatever, but a lot of times you'll see for loops with just a very simple variable. It would work if you used a more complex variable, so you certainly could do that, but often you will see them with a simple variable. It also is worth noting that when you create loops, you're going to want to pay close attention to the loop's condition, and you're going to want to make sure that at some point the loop is going to end. And if you don't do this, you're going to be creating something called an infinite loop, where the script is just going to run and run and run. So this gives you an idea of how you can use for loops and further enhance your knowledge of PHP.